I refused to pay for my son's lavish wedding, and he cut me off. A few days later, he invited me to a peace dinner. 3 lawyers with folders were waiting for me. Sign or you'll never see your granddaughter again. I calmly took my phone out of my bag, dialed, and said, I'll tell you everything right now. Before I tell you everything, do me one small kindness. Hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I read them at my kitchen table with my morning chicory coffee, and your words keep my porch light on. Today's shout out goes to Ms. Rochelle in Jackson, Mississippi. Now come close. This one has teeth. My name is Lorraine Carter. I am 66 years old, the daughter of a longshoreman and a school cafeteria queen who could stretch a bag of rice into a choir. I've lived all my life in New Orleans, in a narrow green shotgun with a tin roof that sings when the rain remembers us. I never imagined my own child would try to turn love into paperwork, but life has a way of tapping the glass until you look up. 2 months before the night I'm about to describe, my daughter Alana asked me for $52,000 for a destination wedding in Santorini. It's once in a lifetime, Mama, she said, showing me a mood board full of cliffside sunsets and flowers that look like they needed their own passports. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and tried to stay soft. Baby, I can give you $5,000 and a brass band in the backyard. We'll string lights, make jambalaya in the big pot, dance until the mosquitoes ask for mercy. Her mouth tightened into a line that didn't belong to the child I raised. You're being small, she said. Her fiancé, Marcus, stood behind her like a lighthouse that forgot how to shine. I didn't shout. 66 has taught me that crying louder than somebody's hunger won't fill them. I just said no, gently and finally. That was a Tuesday. By Sunday, the weekly visits from my 4-year-old granddaughter, Nia, stopped. The phone quieted until silence felt like a roommate. Even the swing in my pecan tree, the one I bought Nia last Christmas, hung still as a held breath. I do what I do when the world gets heavy. I keep my hands moving. I hemmed church dresses for Ms. Darlene down the block and took in a pair of prom pants for a boy who wanted to look like a clean note on his big night. I planted basil in a chipped blue pot and wrote grocery lists in my mother's cursive because even routine can be a kind of prayer. I told myself Alana needed time to cool off. I told myself money is a weather system that makes fools of the best of us. But every time I passed the fridge and saw Nia's crayon drawing of us holding hands, my stick figure dress covered in hearts, her round head crowned with yellow scribbles, I felt a seam give inside me. Then, on a Thursday that smelled like fresh rain and diesel, Alana texted, Mama, let's make peace. Dinner at Bayou Bell tonight? The ribs under my skin loosened. Bayou Bell is our place. The little restaurant on Chartres with the peeling oyster shell wallpaper and gumbo dark as a good secret. We used to go after her dance recitals, her soccer games. After the day she got her first job answering phones at the dentist and came home with the kind of grin money sometimes buys you for a minute, I pressed my thumb to the screen and typed, yes. 6:30. I opened my closet and reached for the yellow raincoat I stitched myself after Ida tore shingles like pages. I wear it when I mean to walk into weather and come out the other side. The streetcar chimed near Esplanade as I headed down. A brass band practiced 2 blocks over, the trumpet showing off until the trombone laughed it back into place. New Orleans was doing what she always does, carrying on, stylish over the bruise. Inside Bayou Bell, it smelled like rue and lemon, and something I can only describe as mercy. The hostess, who's watched Alana grow from a ponytail to a bun, waved. Ms. Lorraine, back room, she whispered, eyes flicking a little like a waitress who knows the kitchen just oversalted the truth. I followed the path past families cracking crab and couples leaning close enough to share a menu and still breathe. There they were in the corner booth. Alana, beautiful the way your own child always is, even when she's become a stranger. Marcus in a suit that said promotion incoming, and 3 men in dark jackets with briefcases parked like little coffins at their feet. For a heartbeat, I thought, maybe Marcus invited his uncles. But my bones knew before my brain did. The men stood in that practiced way, all handshakes and chins dipped to the exact angle that says we already read the end of this story. Their faces were like shut doors. "Mrs. Carter," the gray one said, taking the seat directly across from me as if he paid for the view. "I'm Robert Langley." He didn't tell me his hands were soft, but they were. "These are my associates." He gestured at the other two, one young enough to still be in love with his own pen, the other with a tie so tight I worried for his blood. "We appreciate you joining us." "Marcus said dinner," I answered, pulling my raincoat off and smoothing it over my lap like a napkin I intended to be polite with. I didn't realize the menu tonight was paper. Alana's smile trembled at the edges. Mascara whispered too thick. "Mama, we just want to talk things through. We all said things we didn't mean." "That's funny," I said, because I did mean no. But I held my tongue the way my mama taught me when the pot's just starting to simmer. "Wait a minute. Don't scorch it." Mr. Langley slid a folder onto the table. He didn't open it yet. Men like him like to look generous with the knife. "Mrs. Carter," he began, "given your age and recent decisions, we recommend you consider a durable power of attorney and a limited guardianship, purely to make sure your assets are managed in your best interest." He smiled. "This will protect you and your family." I could have laughed. I balance my checkbook with a pen and a prayer every month. I can still climb my ladder and sweep pecan leaves off the gutter. I can still look a contractor in the eye and make him set his estimate down where both of us can read it. "How old do you think I am?" I asked, not because it mattered, but because sometimes you let a fool hear himself. The young one flinched. "Ma'am, age is just, well, the statute." The older one cut him off with a glance. "This is about convenience," he said smoothly. "Your daughter and future son-in-law are simply offering to take the load." "Is that right?" I asked Alana, turning my face fully toward the child I carried through a hurricane the year she was born. She couldn't meet me straight on. Marcus cleared his throat. "Nia needs stability," he said like he'd just discovered the word in a brochure. "And we need to make sure the family is aligned." "If I sign," I said, letting the corner of my mouth lift the way my mother used to when I brought home a story that needed seasoning, "what happens?" Mr. Langley's smile warmed by 2 degrees. He cracked the folder. There they were, stacked like pancakes going cold. Durable power of attorney, financial management agreement, health care proxy. He touched each one with a fingertip, naming them as if that made them kind. "If you sign, your daughter can manage your bills, investments, and property in a streamlined manner. We can even look at selling assets that are underutilized, say the house, if the market cooperates, to provide you more appropriate accommodations." "Appropriate," I repeated, feeling the word land like a roach in the bread drawer. "And if I don't sign?" I asked. The words tasted like steel, clean and cold. Marcus leaned in, elbows sharp on the table. His voice lowered to that coaxing register men use on used cars and mothers. "Ms. Lorraine, let's not make this hard. We're talking about family. We're talking about Nia." He let the child's name roll between us like a bargaining chip. "We want to keep things positive." Alana's fingers worried a napkin into a rope. She whispered, not looking up, "If you won't let us help you, we have to protect Nia from negativity. Maybe it's better if visits wait until we're on the same page." It's funny the things your body remembers. I felt the same electric stillness I felt the night a man tried to snatch my purse on Rampart, and I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Boy, do not." I placed my palms flat on the table. I did not reach for their pen. I reached into my purse. 3 pens twitched like nervous birds. Mr. Langley cleared his throat. The young one smiled like he practiced kindness in a mirror. The third watched my hand as if a grandmother's fingers were the most dangerous thing in the room. My fingers found what they were looking for: a phone, cracked at the corner where I dropped it last Mardi Gras, and a contact labeled Ms. Dupree, attorney. I tapped. The line rang once. "Genevieve," I said when she picked up, and my voice came out clean as bell metal. "It's Lorraine. I'm at Bayou Bell, back room. Bring the envelope." A beat on her end, then, "On my way." I set the phone down between the oysters and the lies. Mr. Langley blinked, the first honest thing his face did all night. Marcus's jaw shifted. Alana went pale around the mouth. "Mama," she whispered, "what did you do?" "What you taught me," I said, meeting her eyes and begging the little girl inside to come back to the window. "I asked for help before the storm." The young lawyer shuffled papers as if he could make them sound like rain, not hail. Mr. Langley closed the folder slowly, the way a man shuts a door he thought would never slam on him. Outside, a trumpet found a sad note and held it long enough to turn it pretty. Inside, the waitress set down gumbo I hadn't ordered, the steam rising like a blessing I wasn't sure I deserved. I folded my napkin into my lap and breathed. If you've ever waited out a hurricane, you know this feeling, the pressure drop, the hush before the tearing. I wasn't scared. I was busy. And busy is a kind of courage. "Since we're all waiting," I said, spooning the gumbo like it was any other Thursday, "let me tell you boys something my daddy told me. Don't mistake a quiet woman for an empty one." Mr. Langley attempted a smile that could pass a background check. "Mrs. Carter, perhaps we should speak privately. Family matters." "You brought witnesses," I said. "I did too." Alana looked at her lap. Marcus stared at the condensation on his water glass like it had the answers he liked better. I tasted roux and remembered why the first stir matters. The bag of tricks I kept for hard days, my yellow raincoat, my mother's recipes, my phone list with names underlined in ink, had one more card to play. I wrapped my fingers around my spoon and let the heat seep into my bones. Behind the kitchen door, a pot lid clanged. Somewhere on Chartres, a siren rose and then settled, as if the city had decided for this one thin night to set its fight down and listen. "Genevieve will be here in 10, I said. "Eat while it's hot." Genevieve arrived like a front moving in, silver bob tucked behind one ear, navy suit that didn't apologize for existing, raindrops clinging to her lashes as if they wanted to hear the end of this too. She didn't waste the door frame on theatrics. She found my shoulder with a squeeze I felt all the way to my heels and slid into the chair beside me, setting a leather briefcase on the table the way a carpenter sets down a level before fixing a porch. "Evening, Mr. Langley," she said, proof that New Orleans really is a village because of course she knew him. Good lawyers collect each other like recipes. "Before you set your net, let's see what's already swimming." She flipped the latches, and the back room took a new breath. Out came certified copies like saints with their halos intact, my revocation of any old convenience powers of attorney stamped and sealed, updated beneficiaries I'd sat with her to correct line by line, and then the spine of the thing, the reason my hands had stopped shaking on Tuesday, the Lorraine A. Carter Living Trust with the Nia Carter Education and Dignity Subtrust, co-trusted to a bank that doesn't spook when somebody puffs his chest. Genevieve spoke plain, the way my daddy liked his sermons. Ms. Carter's home is titled in the trust. Her savings and small cafe equity are likewise assigned. She receives a monthly distribution per schedule. Principal is reserved for health, housing, and that little girl's education. Successor trustee is the bank. Legal oversight is me. No individual beneficiary, meaning your clients, holds any management authority. She slid the top document toward Langley with 2 tidy fingers. The steam from my gumbo ribboned up between us like a coda. "You diverted assets," the younger attorney blurted, looking more boy than barrister. "She safeguarded them," Genevieve corrected, soft enough to sting, after being tipped that someone was shopping her signature like a coupon. The third man's pen stopped moving. Langley's smile did that thin thing expensive men practice in bathroom mirrors. He opened his mouth to pivot, but Genevieve produced a second envelope, and, Lord, I blessed every prayer that put her in my phone. "And since we're keeping the record true," she said, laying glossy photos down like tarot no one wanted drawn, "a brief visual aid, your office, 2 Thursdays ago, time-stamped. Ms. Alana Carter and Mr. Marcus Reed meeting with your team to discuss strategy. Ms. Carter providing the square footage and market comps of her mother's home. Mr. Reed requesting draft language for durable power and limited guardianship. The 3 of you billing at full freight while planning to present these documents at a peace dinner with no counsel present for Ms. Carter." A hush went around the table that felt like the room itself choosing its side. Marcus's hands, which had been telegraphing confidence on the wood, slid under, fingers lacing into a knot a Cub Scout couldn't undo. Alana's napkin rope unraveled into her lap. She wouldn't look at the photos, just stared past Langley's shoulder at the framed shrimp boat like it was a horizon she could still run to. "Where did you get those?" the young one asked, voice cracking at the lip of manhood. Genevieve offered him a smile I'd seen melt county clerks and revive tired waitresses. "A retired sheriff with a camera and some time," she said, "also known as a private investigator, though I prefer my friend Eddie from choir. He sends his regards." Langley finally found his tone. "Mrs. Carter," he said to me, skipping my Ms., like he could unname me into complicity. "Surely you can see how complex finances can become at your stage of life. Your daughter is merely trying to ensure—" "My name is Lorraine," I said, surprising myself with how even it came out, "and my daughter asked me for $52,000 to throw into the Aegean for pictures. When I declined, she and this man withdrew my grandbaby. Then y'all arrived with a portable courthouse and a guilt marinade. You can keep the pitch. I know what stage of life I'm in. It's called the one where I read what I sign." Marcus stood too quickly. His chair barked across the tile, earning us a glance from the waitress. "We're done," he snapped, and there it was, the old bravado under the fresh suit. "You can't lock up family money in some bank trust. We're blood." Genevieve tapped the trust again, polite as a door knock. "Blood doesn't let itself be used as a wrench," she said. "And it isn't family money just because you can spell the last name." She turned to Alana then, not unkind. "Baby, you know better. Your mama marched you into credit unions for lollipops and literacy. Don't pretend you don't hear the difference between help and control." Alana's eyes filled, then shined with that stubborn Carter light I recognize in my bathroom mirror when I tie my scarf. You don't hear me, she whispered, voice small as second grade. I hear you just fine, I answered, and I hated how tired I sounded, but I will not be furniture you rearranged to make the room prettier. Langley gathered his pages, the legal equivalent of a man scooping dignity off the floor. We'll be in touch, he said, the way men do when they've run out of this room and plan to find a softer one. Please advise your client that any interference with visitation— Try it, Genevieve said, her sweetness back. I've got 3 judges who do not care for weaponized grandchildren and a state bar that loves a clean complaint about elder abuse coercion at restaurants. Also, you left your receipt on the table last week. It's itemized. Imagine my delight. The young one went pink. The third found sudden fascination in the oyster shell wallpaper. They left with the same hush. Decent people use for funeral doors. Marcus paused long enough to say, Nia needs things. The word things hanging like Mardi Gras beads you can't get off the power line. She needs people, I said, and love that doesn't come stapled to forms. He swallowed, then followed his lawyers out. Alana lingered long enough to brush my sleeve with her fingertips, a gesture so old and so hers I almost told all my papers to climb back into the briefcase and let me go backward. Mama, she said, the word opening a room in me and breaking a window at the same time. I thought this was the only way. You thought fear was a staircase, I said as gently as I could. But it's a hole if you dig it with somebody else's shovel. She looked at the gumbo and then at me and left before either of us did something we'd have to pick out of our teeth for a year. Bayou Bell remembered how to be a restaurant. Spoons resumed their clink. Somebody laughed at the bar like a relief valve opening. Our waitress approached with the soft step people use when they've witnessed a storm through glass. Y'all need anything else? Just a to-go for this, I said, gesturing at what heat had softened but appetite hadn't touched. And maybe a lemon icebox pie, 2 forks. She brought it with the kind of kindness New Orleans invented, no extra charge for the mercy. Genevieve and I ate tiny bites of sweetness and talked next steps, not as battle but as housekeeping. Change the alarm code to numbers that mean only me. Add a motion light to the backyard. Make a file for every boundary and keep it in the blue accordion we'd labeled roses and receipts. Because why shouldn't defense have a pretty name? When I got home, the house breathed like it had been holding itself small for company and could finally stretch. I hung my yellow raincoat on the hook by the kitchen door and stood a minute in the dark, listening to the distant rattle of a streetcar and the closer purr of my cat judging my timing. I made chamomile, added honey for the parts sugar can reach, and cried in the good chair with my feet tucked under me like a girl too tired to posture. Grief is not guilt. It's the tax on love. I paid it until the cup went cold. In the days that followed, silence moved in again, but this time it didn't colonize. It rented. I let it pay utilities while I took my mornings on Esplanade, waving at the men who sweep before the sun claims its shift, bought peaches from a woman who counts change like a hymn, and taught reading at the branch where boys pretend they don't care and then light up when a paragraph lets them out of a cage. I changed my passwords, wrote my list of what I won't trade, dignity, peace, porch light, Nia, and taped it inside the pantry where only a woman who cooks will see. I half expected retaliation, the small petty kind or the loud kind that wants neighbors. But what came first was a text on a Wednesday at 7:14 a.m., when the kettle hadn't clicked yet and the sky still had yesterday's blue clinging to its hem. Mama, Alana wrote, no emojis, no decorations, just the word and a comma. Our sitter quit. Could you take Nia this afternoon? I have a prenatal appointment. I don't want her in that waiting room. Beneath it, a second bubble arrived like a confession. I know the rules. No money talk, no papers, just help. I stood at the sink, gripping the edge like a rail on a storm bus, and watched the magnolia across the street flick one fat petal down like a white flag. I typed back, yes, drop her at 3. We'll make red beans and read, she'll be ready at 6. And Alana, thank you for naming the rules. Boundaries are love with a backbone. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then settled into a short reply that made my knees wobble more than any legal victory had. Thank you, Mama. I set out the little apron Nia likes, the one with lemons. I pulled the beans to soak and measured rice like a ritual you hand down the bloodline. The blue accordion on the counter looked less like armor and more like a toolbox. When 3 o'clock came, a small fist knocked my door in a rhythm I knew before she was born. I opened to Nia's grin, missing one front tooth and not missing me at all. She launched herself into me with the force children use when they know you'll catch all of it. Over her shoulder, Alana stood on my porch, hand on the railing the way she used to when she was 5, and we practiced please on neighbors' stoops. Her eyes were swollen from a night I hadn't been invited to. Her mouth was set to don't cry until you get back to the car. 6, she said, voice steady like mine had been at Bayou Bell. 6, I said. She nodded once, a woman making a contract with the right pen this time, and left us to our beans. As I rinsed the red ones and Nia chattered about the letter S. It goes like a snake and like stop, Grandma. I felt something shift back into place that wasn't the old thing, not the fragile truce we used to fake, but a new plank laid right on the joist. The house creaked the way a house does when it's remembering how to hold. I stirred the pot, tucked a bay leaf under the surface, and whispered to the steam, "All right then, we'll build from here." The first afternoon with Nia felt like a house remembering its song. She barreled in with a backpack that jangled, marbles, crayons, 3 Band-Aids still on their paper, and flung herself at my waist hard enough to make the wooden spoon clack against the pot. "It smells like red beans," she announced, as if naming a miracle made it more true. "And like you." I wiped her hands, tied on the little lemon apron, and set her on the stool that used to be Alana's when we made beignets on snow days that never came. "Rule 1, I said, tapping the counter with the handle of the spoon. "We stir slow. Rule 2, we taste when the bubbles say our name. Rule 3, we keep our promises." She squinted, serious as a judge. "What promise?" "That we read after dinner," I said, "and that we use our big girl no when we need it." She practiced a soft no, then a firmer one, then a giant theatrical no. And we laughed until the pot hissed like it wanted in on the joke. At 6 o'clock on the dot, Alana's car pulled up. She came to the door with her shoulders set the way people do when they expect to be punished. I kept my voice even. "She ate good. We read Corduroy twice. She picked out tomorrow's socks." Alana nodded, eyes bright. "Thank you," she said. Careful, like the word might shatter in the air. "Same time Friday?" I wanted to ask 100 things. Are you sleeping? Is Marcus kind when the lights are off? Do you hear yourself in Nia when she argues with the moon? But I kept to the rules. "Text me by noon," I said. "We'll keep it about Nia." She looked relieved and sad at the same time, like a person standing in the right line with the wrong story in her pocket. 2 weeks turned into a rhythm that made sense to the bones. Tuesdays and Fridays after preschool, Saturdays from 10 to 3. We kept it simple. Swings in the park on Esplanade, the library's story hour where Miss Mavis uses all her voices, a stop at Mr. Boudreaux's produce stand for the strawberries Nia insists smell like hearts. In my kitchen, we measured rice with our fingers, first knuckle always, and wrote our names in flour on the counter like we were signing a treaty with dinner. When she napped on the couch, I sat at the table with a legal pad and made a list of chores that sang at me. Change the smoke detector batteries, oil the back gate, label the folders Genevieve gave me with my mother's fountain pen. The blue accordion looked less like armor now and more like a toolbox with pretty tabs. House, health, bank, boundaries, trust. I slid a copy of today's plan into the boundaries pocket after each visit. Who picked up, who dropped off, what time, what was said, and felt an odd peace. Receipts aren't petty. They're blankets for cold truths. It wasn't all easy. One Friday, Alana was late and didn't text. By 6:40, my jaw hurt from clenching, and Nia had melted into that particular puddle children become when they feel grown folks' weather, but don't know the word for it. I put on the Motown playlist and we danced the meanness out. Her a starfish, me a coconut tree, the cat our unwilling audience. When the headlights finally swung across my living room, I went to the door with Nia on my hip and the boundary already forming in my mouth. Alana stepped in, eyes red, palms up. "Mama, I'm sorry," she said before I could start. "The OB made me stay while they ran tests. My pressure's up. The nurse said bed rest if I don't act right." The word mama still does the small violence of breaking me open. I set Nia down. "Thank you for telling me what's true," I said. "Text next time. 2 words. Running late. And what time is the next appointment? I'll plan the day around it." She nodded, relief coming off her like steam. "Tuesday, 11. She hesitated. Could you take Nia then too?" "Yes," I said, because saying yes to a child isn't the same as saying yes to foolishness. "We'll go to the library and return your book about the woman who plants moons." Nia piped up from the floor. "It's Luna Love's Library Day, Grandma," and I made a note to get a copy for our shelf. On Sunday after church, I found Ms. Darlene on my porch with the pie and questions. "You good?" she asked, eyes scanning my face like she had a scanner gun hidden in her hat. I poured sweet tea and told her the short version, how Bayou Bell had been a courtroom I didn't choose, how Genevieve brought paper the way some folks bring casseroles, how the quiet afterward tasted less like punishment and more like a chance to hear my own breath. Ms. Darlene sucked her teeth at the part with the 3 suits. "Lawyers at dinner," she said, "is like roaches at a picnic. You know the potato salad ain't safe." I laughed hard enough to tilt my chair, then felt my eyes heat. "I want my girl back," I said, "but not at the price they named." She folded my hand into hers. "Child, sometimes you get your people back and sometimes you get yourself back. Either way is worth the work." Work came Monday in the shape of a text from Marcus at 5:52 a.m., too early for apologies, just right for panic. Alana's blood pressure's high. Doctor says modified bed rest starting today. Can you keep Nia this week during the day? I stared at the screen while the kettle began to sing. There it was. The ask. Stripped of manipulation, plain as oatmeal. I typed slower than my fingers wanted. Yes, Monday to Friday, 8-5. My house. You pack her lunches, I'll feed her heart. Ground rules. No money talk, no legal talk, no surprise drop-ins. If you need to discuss plans, text after 7 p.m. We'll set Sunday nights as schedule time by phone. The dots pulsed, stopped, started, agreed. Thank you, Ms. Lorraine. The Miss and Ms. caught in my teeth. I will always be mama to the part of him that believes in mercy, but I let it go. People name you by the bridge they can make that day. By Wednesday, the house had a new hum. We built a fort in the front room with quilts that still smelled faintly of ivory soap and summer. Read Last Stop on Market Street so many times I could taste the bus exhaust, and took turns being the bus driver with a paper plate steering wheel. At noon, I made small plates. A boiled egg, toast soldiers, apple slices fanned like a deck. I taught Nia how to ask her own body what it wanted. My tummy says popcorn, she guessed. Your tummy is a comedian, I said, but we will listen after nap. When she slept, I wiped counters that weren't dirty and stood at the sink watching a gecko take ownership of my back steps. My hands shook then, the delayed tremor of a woman who finally found a chair after standing through 6 songs. I let them shake. Then I ran water until it turned not hot and washed a clean cup like it needed me. In the afternoons, we walked past the school where Alana had learned the Our Father and how to jump double Dutch, then stopped at the corner where Mr. Alvin used to sell pralines out of a cooler. Nia tagged the sidewalk cracks like they were lily pads. If you step on a line, she declared, you have to tell a truth. I stepped and said, I am scared sometimes. She stepped and said, I don't like naps. Me neither, I whispered, earning a conspirator's grin. We brought a paper sack of pralines to Alana on her porch and waved from the step. She waved back, belly under the soft dress like a small poem making itself. Every night I wrote a note to myself on the back of an envelope. What went right, what needed a tighter screw. Right. Nia used her no with me, asked for 1 more minute and meant it. Tighten, set timer for cleanup, sing the song, make it a game. It sounds fussy, I know. But after Bayou Bell, after watching men stack paper like sandbags around my life, I wanted the small satisfaction of stacking my own kind of paper, women's paper, kitchen paper, notes that turn into guardrails for the next day. On Friday, Marcus came by at 5 with a bag of groceries and an apology that looked like effort. Alana says the doctor wants her off her feet as much as possible, he said, setting down milk and a loaf of bread. I figured I could at least bring staples. I nodded at the bag without making a fuss, the way you pat a puppy that finally sat. Thank you, I said. And pick a night next week to take the trash cans back from the curb for Ms. Agnes. Her arthritis is hollering. He blinked, then smiled a small, real smile. Yes, ma'am. He looked around my kitchen at the lemon apron on its hook, the blue accordion closed but not hidden, the list on the fridge that read no papers, no pressure, no passes. He touched the corner of the list with 2 fingers. You always knew how to make a room feel safe, he said, and for the first time in months my throat didn't tighten at his voice. Saturday morning the sky pulled on a gray sweater and warned rain. We dragged the porch plants closer to the wall. Alana texted a photo of her ankles. Less swollen. Nurse says numbers are better, she wrote. Thank you for the beans. Marcus loved the leftovers. I sent back a heart and a pot emoji because words can get in the way of a truce trying to stand. Nia and I spread newspapers on the floor and planted marigold seeds in yogurt cups, her tongue poking out in concentration. These are for Mama's porch, she declared, so the bugs go away and the pretty stays. I kissed the crown of her head and thought, let that be the lesson for the whole year. Just after lunch, while the cat pretended to ignore us from the window, my doorbell rang. A woman's silhouette stood behind the screen, hat tilted, tote bag heavy, shoulders squared for business. When I opened, she stuck out her hand like we were about to sign a treaty. Name's Laverne, she said, Darlene's cousin. She says you're the lady who knows about papers that don't bite. I've got a mess of beneficiaries and a nephew with sticky fingers. Behind her, the rain decided to mean it. I glanced at Nia, who was now explaining to her dolls how seeds sleep before they bloom. I looked back at Laverne's tote and saw the corner of a life insurance policy peeking out, a will with coffee rings, a social security letter, someone's shaky signature half finished. Come in, I said, stepping back, feeling the house adjust gladly to 1 more chair. Wipe your feet. We're building rooms where women read their own names. And because life has a sense of timing you can't teach, my phone buzzed before I could fetch the extra folder. It was Alana. Mama, doctor called. They want me on full bed rest starting Monday. I'm scared. Can we talk about next week? I read it twice. I looked at the seeds tucked under soil, at Nia's lemon apron, at Laverne's tote bag, at the blue accordion on my counter that suddenly looked like both anchor and sail. We can talk, I typed back. Tonight, 7. We'll make a plan. Then I put the phone face down, turned to Laverne with a pen, and said the sentence that had become my backbone. Let's start with your name and put it where it belongs. By 7 that night, my kitchen table looked like a planning desk and a mercy seat had a baby. I opened the blue accordion, slid boundaries to the front, and put on a fresh pot of chicory coffee I wouldn't drink after 6 in case sleep tried to visit. Alana called on time. I put her on speaker so my hands could keep moving. Pen, calendar, the list Ms. Darlene insists I tape to the fridge that reads no papers, no pressure, no passes. Full bed rest, Alana said, her voice thinned by fear, and that particular shame women learn too early when our bodies insist on help. Doctor says feet up, bathroom only, short showers, no stairs if I can help it. I pictured the house. Narrow, tall, too many steps for a woman who needed stillness to bake a child. We'll set up downstairs, I said, already drawing a box around the back room on a sheet of copy paper. Borrow a recliner, move a bassinet in early, put a bell she can shake if she needs water. I heard the exhale through the tiny phone holes. Thank you, she said, and then quieter. Mama, I'm scared I did this to myself. Baby, I answered, you didn't build this river, you're just crossing it. We'll throw ropes. Sunday we made a schedule. Marcus came with a clipboard he bought to look dependable. Laverne arrived with a casserole to make sure none of us forgot how to eat when worry mouths off. We set blocks. I'd have Nia 8-5 at my house. Marcus would handle dinner and bath, then bring her back to sleep under her own ladybug nightlight. Ms. Agnes down the block would do 2 afternoons of quiet play for cash and companionship. Alana would not pretend to carry laundry from anywhere ever. We stuck the schedule to my fridge and theirs, and I made Marcus take a photo and set it as his lock screen because men forget paper when adrenaline talks. And Sunday nights, I said, tapping the line we'd boxed in green. We have a 15-minute check-in by phone. Feelings optional. Logistics mandatory. He laughed, then looked like a man who might cry if he blinked wrong. Yes, ma'am. Monday, Nia and I built a new weekday out of old parts. We made oatmeal with cinnamon, cut apples thin, stirred honey into warm milk. She learned to hold a pencil the way Miss Mavis likes. I learned the joys of a 4-year-old synonym list. Grandma, I'm not sleepy. I'm rest resistant. We invented a timer song for cleanup and a whisper game for the walk home from the park. Each afternoon at 4:30, we stood on Alana's porch, where I left a bag of sugar cookies and a card Nia drew, hearts with legs. Then waved through the screen while Alana waved back from the couch nest we'd built under the window. It wasn't ideal. It was honest. On Wednesday, Laverne returned with her tote and 2 more women, Ms. Jean from across Claiborne, who brought 7-Up pound cake and 3 beneficiary forms with everybody but her on them, and Rhonda, a braider with wrists like tree roots and a lease thicker than her landlord's patience. We spread everything on my table under the good light and made a circle that felt like church without the scolding. Genevieve stopped by after court, shoes in hand, law in her purse, and taught us how to read a deed without crying. Your name goes where your life sleeps, she said, drawing boxes with my best pen. We stamped a new phrase across 3 minds in one lease. Your name, your signature. When they left, the house exhaled the way rooms do when women tell the truth in them. Of course, the past doesn't stop tapping just because you changed the locks. Friday morning, a courier slid a fat envelope under my door with Langley's letterhead like a watermark you can't wash out. A cease and desist, he called it, scolding me for defamatory characterizations at a family dinner and tortious interference with expected economic advantage, because I had the gall to move my own money into my own trust. I sat at the table and laughed into my coffee until the cat left the room, offended. Then I texted a photo to Genevieve and wrote, "Do I frame it or compost it?" Her reply came back in 2 beats. Neither. Staple to our bar complaint draft. And tell Ms. Darlene to stop teasing God. She said she wanted paperwork. And look at him providing. We filed Genevieve's response, 2 pages of velvet-covered thunder, and notice reminding Mr. Langley that the state bar does not consider ambush a grandmother with pens at gumbo to be best practices. Then I put the letter in the blue accordion under a new tab labeled noise. Tabs are a kind of spell if you do them right. That afternoon, Marcus showed up early with a box fan and contrition. "House gets hot in the back room," he said, plugging it in with the eager anxiety of a man who wants to fix what he broke but can only reach outlets. "Also, I set alarms on my phone for your check-ins. Also, I called my mother." I braced. "She wanted to know why we hadn't handled you," he admitted, staring at the cord like it had answers. "I told her we tried and failed and that you'd saved us from ourselves." She hung up mad. "I'll try again later." I put a hand on his shoulder with exactly 2 pats. The universal grandmother sign for "I see your effort. Keep going." "Good," I said. "Tell her she can bring a casserole and meet my rules like everyone else." Saturday dawned with rain practicing scales on my tin roof. Nia and I made paper boats and floated them in the puddle on the back steps. She named them after people she loves. "This one is Grandma. This one is Mama. This one is Baby Who Kicks." "What about Daddy?" I asked. She thought, then plunked a leaf in the water. "He's a leaf. He goes fast." I tucked the metaphor away in the blue place where I keep the lines children write without trying. That night when the rain stopped walking and started talking, Alana called from the couch nest with a tight voice. "Mama, my head hurts," she said, like drums. "Call Marcus," I instructed, already reaching for my shoes. "And I'm on my way. Hospital now." We met in the ER parking lot, neon hissing fate. I took Nia's hand and sent them inside with a prayer I would have pretended not to believe at 25 and now kept in my pocket like a Saints game ticket. At home, I made a pallet on my floor for Nia and slept in 10-minute stitches between the beeps of my phone. At 3:11 a.m., a text. "They're keeping me, monitoring. Baby, okay, me too, scared." I wrote back, "I'm here. Nia's here. The porch light is on. Breathe." We breathed for a long time. The next day, Sunday, I stood in my little backyard and looked at the pecan tree I have loved longer than most of my neighbors. I remembered my husband pounding the swing set into the dirt 30 years ago with the stubborn joy of a man making something solid during a year. Everything else felt like soup. I remembered Alana's knees skinned and shining, her laugh fat as summer. I remembered the drive home from Bayou Bell, the way my hand shook, then steadied, the thrill of a door lock answering to a new key. I made a decision I'd been circling for weeks. I texted Ms. Darlene in Laverne, Tuesday night porch circle. Bring extra chairs. We're calling it Roses and Receipts. NOLA. Snacks provided, papers welcome, feelings optional, a beat later. Also, bring notepads. We're writing a bed rest plan for any woman who needs it after us. No one should have to invent this in the middle of a storm. They sent back a row of roses and a line of amens that made me smile. Tuesday, Alana was still in the hospital, pressure behaving when watched. Marcus came by with updates and wilted flowers that looked like what happens when you don't water apology. I took the vase, refreshed the stems, and sent him to fill Ms. Agnes's bird feeder. At 7, my porch filled. Widows, braiders, 2 teachers, 1 nurse who'd worked night shift and still came because she says women's work is the only caffeine that lasts. We passed around blue folders like hymnals. Laverne drew a diagram of a downstairs couch nest. Rhonda wrote a script for telling folks to call before coming by with casseroles. Ms. Jean, tiny and sharp as a quilting needle, taught us how to adjust a recliner's lever without cussing. We wrote it all down and titled it with a flourish. If the doctor says lay down a neighborhood plan, it wasn't legal, it was law. Halfway through, my phone buzzed. Alana. They're discharging me tomorrow. Strict bed rest. Doctor says we did the right thing. We did, I texted, and then I looked around my porch at these women signing their names to each other and felt something like a hinge settling back into place. It didn't make me soft. The next morning, the mail brought another letter from Langley. Thin, this time, nothing but posture. I put it under noise and watered my basil. The day after, the library asked if I'd consider hosting a Saturday workshop on papers that don't bite. I said yes, with a caveat. We start with tea and a cookie, I told the branch manager, and we end with a list. What you won't trade. By the end of the week, our plan was humming. Nia with me by day, Alana off her feet and learning the art of asking, Marcus alternating between competent and overwhelmed in a way that looked blessedly human. On Friday evening, just before dinner, they brought Nia over early because Alana needed quiet and the house needed clean. We spread a blanket on my floor and built a city out of blocks, naming the streets after women who'd kept me. This is Ms. Darlene Drive, Nia said, plunking a blue chunk down. This is Grandma Lane. She looked up at me with that Frank Carter gaze. What's Mama's street? Hope, I said. Not for poetry, but because accuracy felt like medicine. It's under construction, baby, but the sign is up. The week Alana came home on strict bed rest, New Orleans behaved like the friend who brings soup and wipes your counters while you pretend you don't see. The river stayed inside its banks, the power held through an afternoon thunder tantrum, and the grocery had bananas that weren't green or ghosts. I took that as permission to keep building. On Monday morning, I walked into the Mid-City Library with a plastic tub full of blue folders and a sign I'd painted the night before. Roses and Receipts, NOLA. Read your name out loud. The branch manager handed me a key to the multi-purpose room like she was passing me a small town. We've got a waiting list, she said, amusement and pride holding hands. They told their cousins. I smiled. Good. The cousins need chairs too. We opened with tea and cookies because women learn better when our mouths don't feel punished. Laverne took names. Rhonda ran the copier like a church usher with a holy mission. Ms. Jean sat by the door, intercepting latecomers with a smile that said, "You're not late. You're here." I introduced myself without telling the Bayou Bell story. This room didn't need the gossip, it needed the map. "Here's what we're doing," I said, writing big on the whiteboard so the back row didn't have to squint. Titles, beneficiaries, healthcare proxies you actually picked. how to say no without auditioning, how to set your phone to remember what you shouldn't have to. We are not making you lawyers, we are making you loud. A murmur ran around the room that sounded like relief. We divided into stations, house, health, bank, boundaries, and I watched the hunch lift from shoulders as pens started spelling women into their own lives. At the boundaries table, I put a stack of index cards with a line across the top, "What I won't trade." Some women stared at the blank like it was a dare. "Start small," I said. "Peace, sleep. The way your heart quits running when your phone rings, your porch at dusk. Add names later if you need to." A young mother wrote, "My laugh." A grandmother wrote, "My hymn on Sundays." A woman in a warehouse uniform wrote, "My check." We laminated the cards because Laverne believes rules last longer when they shine. Between sessions, I checked my phone. Marcus's texts had become a slow string of competence. BP 13282, hydration good, lunch delivered, Nia at Agnes's, dishwasher running, trash to curb. The man had discovered lists, and I was not about to ruin it by applause. I wrote back, proud of the numbers, porch light on. Alana sent emoji-only updates from the couch, a book, a water droplet, a heart. It was the only language that didn't cost her pressure. I learned to read the sequence like a sentence. On Wednesday, we had a scare. At 10:30, while I was showing Ms. Jean how to add a payable on death beneficiary without letting a cousin into the vault, my phone lit with Marcus's name, bleeding, going to ER now. My body moved before my mind did. "Cover me," I told Laverne, already grabbing my tote, "and tell Ms. Jean she's in charge of the health table." I called Ms. Agnes from the parking lot. "Nia," I said, "now." "Already walking to the school," she answered, the click of her front gate sounding like cavalry. I arrived at the ER in 9 minutes that felt like a week and found Marcus in the waiting room trying to teach his hands to breathe. "They took her back," he said. "They said placenta. I don't know. They said watch." I squeezed his shoulder and made him drink water. When they finally let me in, Alana's face looked both ancient and brand new. "Mama," she said, whisper thin, "we're okay." The baby's heart flickered steady on the monitor. The doctor used words like precaution and watchful and boring will save us. "We love boring," I said, and meant it. They kept her overnight. I took Nia home and let her sleep in my bed with the good pillow and the cat guarding her feet. I lay awake and counted my own heartbeats until dawn turned the ceiling pink. Crisis makes people honest. The next morning, as I packed Nia's lunch, my doorbell rang. It was Marcus's mother, a woman who wears her hair like a verdict and carries a purse big enough to hold a grudge. We have never been close. We are plants that need different sun. She stood on my porch and looked past me into my house as if I'd stolen her seasonings. "You done turned my son against me," she said, skipping hello like it cost. "He's listening to you, doing your little schedules, making me sign in for visits like I'm a stranger." I kept my hand on the door where it could feel the grain of wood my husband sanded in 1992. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice in the register I use for feral cats and people who forgot their own mothers. I turned no one. The hospital turned him into a man who writes things down. And you're welcome to see your granddaughter when her parents say it works. And I say it does not interrupt nap. She sniffed. "Women these days think paper will save them." "No, ma'am," I answered. "Paper won't save us, but it will keep us from drowning while we swim." She looked at me a long time, and then, to my surprise, she nodded once. "I brought greens," she said, lifting a grocery sack I hadn't noticed. "Collards. Since you're feeding my baby while my other baby try not to forget she got sense." I stepped back, and the door swung wider on a hinge I'd oiled that morning. By Friday, Alana was home again, quieter, heavier with instructions, stitched together by rules that tasted like safety if you let them melt slow. I set up a chalkboard at our house titled What We Know and wrote numbers down each evening: blood pressure, ounces of water, hours slept, how many times Nia made us laugh. Marcus added his own row, titled What Went Right, because men need a column to brag into even when they did nothing but remember trash day. The chalk made us kinder. It's hard to fight when there's proof next to your face that you're trying. Saturday, the library hosted our second workshop. A line formed before we opened the doors. Women with documents and daughters. A man or two in the back pretending they were just there for the air conditioning. Genevieve stopped by with a stack of simple wills and a box of pens that write like butter. We added a new station called Locks, where Drew, my neighbor's cousin, showed folks how to rekey a deadbolt and mount a motion light without calling a man who would tell them it's complicated and charge them to feel dumb. At the end, we went around and said one sentence we were taking home. Ms. Jean said, "I can change a beneficiary without asking permission." The warehouse woman said, "I put my hours on paper so my boss can't forget them." A teenager said, "No is a complete sentence." I wrote mine big on the board. Boundaries are love with a backbone. On the way home, Nia in the back seat humming a song that was mostly vowel, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't know. It was Robert Langley, his voice dipped in apology syrup. "Mrs. Carter," he began, "I believe we got off on the wrong foot." "No," I said, merging onto broad, "you got off on my foot." He coughed. "Be that as it may, I'd like to recommend mediation for the family issues. Our clients—" "Your clients," I repeated, because sometimes echo is medicine. "Send anything you have to Ms. Dupree." Of course," he said, the way men do when a woman refuses to perform confusion. "And Mrs. Carter? I read your trust. It is thorough." "It's accurate," I said, and hung up before I lost the high ground to petty. That night, the porch circle gathered with pound cake and glances at their phones because we had all learned how to listen in two places at once. I told them about the hospital, about the chalkboard, about the way fear quiets if you give it a column to sit in. Ms. Darlene squeezed my knee. "You holding?" "I am," I said, "and I'm tired." Laverne stood, clapped her hands like a choir director. "Okay then," she said, "we're closing with a song." We sang the old hymn that knows our mothers' names. The neighborhood listened and didn't mind. Just before bed, Alana texted a photo, her hand on her belly, Nia's small palm pressed beside it, as if they were both promising the same thing. "Tomorrow is a new day," she wrote. "Thank you for loving us in the hard parts." I lay back and let the words settle where the worry had been and whispered back, "Sleep." I've got first watch. Finale days don't announce themselves. They sneak in under a regular morning and wait to see if you'll look up. This one started with toast soldiers and Nia reciting the days of the week like a spell. We were halfway to the library when my phone rang. It was Marcus, and the noise behind his voice made my scalp prickle. Hospital clatter, a nurse saying now, a door hinge choosing haste. "It's time," he said. "They're taking her. The doctor says it's best." There was terror and relief wrestling in his throat. "Come." I turned the car like a woman who has navigated hurricanes and family reunions and knew which intersections forgive bad decisions. At the ER, Ms. Agnes was already there to take Nia's hand because the neighborhood moves faster than an ambulance when a baby decides to arrive early. I kissed my granddaughter's forehead, looked her in the eye and said, "We're brave," and she nodded like a soldier who trusts her general. They let me into pre-op because sometimes the world remembers who grandmothers are. Alana's face was calm in the way a person gets when she has accepted a hard bargain. I give you this fear. You give me this child. Mama, she whispered, handing me her phone. If I say anything foolish after, take it away. I smiled. I'll take everything that's foolish and leave you what's true. They wheeled her away. I squeezed Marcus's shoulder 3 times. The signal we invented years ago at a funeral. I am here, I am here, I am here. Waiting rooms teach you what you worship. A woman across from us prayed with her whole body. A man hunched over his phone like it contained the last rope on earth. I wrote a list because that's my altar. Diapers, 2 sizes, bassinet sheets, Miss Jean's soup, a sign on their door asking folks to text before visits, a schedule reshuffle that gave Marcus the morning shift, and me evenings because Alana would need help in the dark hours when babies remember their wolf. When the doctor finally came, his face was the one I like, tired enough to tell the truth. Mama and baby are well, he said, and I felt my knees ask the floor if we could sit. We'll watch her pressure. He's small but loud. We love loud, I said, and Marcus laughed like a man who found his lungs again. They let us see him behind glass first, red and outraged and perfect, a fist already shaking at taxes he doesn't know exist. Marcus put his palm on the glass. I put mine on his back. He's got your ears, I said. Poor child, he answered, and we both cried. The dignified, leaking kind. When I went in to see Alana, she looked like triumph, and the end of a marathon and the beginning of a country. Mama, she said, reaching for me with the hand that didn't have a tube. Meet Malik. I touched his foot with one finger and felt a current run through every room love ever made for me. Welcome, I whispered to him, and to the version of our family that would have to learn how to be alive again. Back home, we ran the plan. The porch circle swung into motion like a marching band making a turn it has practiced for months. Rhonda texted the shift calendar. Laverne delivered a recliner with a footrest that doesn't stick. Ms. Jean set up a soup rota and scolded anyone who tried to bring cream of anything. Drew came over with tools and kindness and installed a dimmer, because babies deserve the soft version of light when they first start listening. Marcus's mother arrived with a pot of greens and the look of a woman who is trying not to be wrong out loud. I'll take afternoon shifts, she said, lifting her chin the way pride does when it refuses to be the villain it was in rehearsal. We accept, I said, and handed her a copy of the If the Doctor Says Lay Down plan. She read it all the way through and then, to her credit, pulled a pen from her purse. We should add grandmothers, she said, not looking at me. Singular and plural, I agreed, and wrote grandmothers, both, in the margin. 3 days later, the library hosted our biggest workshop yet. Word had passed, bring your papers, leave your shame. We started with a new ritual. On a table by the door, I put a stack of cobalt blue folders and a jar of Sharpies. Above it, a sign. Write your name first. Women wrote, big, small, wobbly, fierce. We took a picture of the table, not for the internet, but for the archive, because some days you must document your own survival. Halfway through, the branch manager brought in a city hall aide in a blazer too stiff for summer and said, she wants to hear you. I told our story without the gory. A grandmother, a trust, a boundary that learned to walk, a porch that became a classroom. The aide took notes and asked if I would consult on a city pamphlet. Plain language for grown folks. We'll pay, she added quickly. I smiled. We'll invoice, I said, and the room laughed the kind of laugh that pays down a debt. Meanwhile, Mr. Langley discovered the taste of defeat. Genevieve forwarded me his latest email, short, professional, the legal equivalent of a shrug. He proposed mediation again, this time with a neutral whose beard has arbitrated half divorces on the East Bank. Genevieve said yes with conditions, no gag clauses, no revisiting the trust, no mention of guardianship ever again, and a sentence in the recital that read like a weather report. The parties attempted an inappropriate asset transfer at a restaurant. One party declined. Counsel advised. Measures were taken. "It's petty," I said, and she shook her head. "It's accurate," she answered. "Accuracy is a kindness to the future." We signed by DocuSign while Malik snored on my chest and Nia practiced her letter M for both of them. The real mediation took place at my kitchen table without a neutral, just a baby. A 4-year-old with a crayon agenda, one mother on a recliner, one father washing bottles like penance, and me making a chart. "Here's what I will provide," I said, writing it down where everyone could see. 3 days a week of care for Nia after school, 1 overnight for Alana to sleep without wolf baby ears, grocery runs on Tuesdays, boundary enforcement when relatives try to turn love into potlucks with opinions. Here's what I won't provide, and I wrote that too. Money, legal signatures, my peace. Marcus added a column titled, "What We Owe Back," and put real things in it. Gas money, cleaning the gutters at my house, a ride to the doctor for Miss Agnes when the bus is late, showing up for library day when I teach budgets so the girls in the back see a man who sits and learns. Alana asked for one line in the middle and I let her take my pen. She wrote in slow, careful letters, "We will not use children as levers." We all signed it. Nia stamped it with a star-shaped sticker because governance, in my experience, needs glitter. It would be a lie to say love got instant manners. Babies cry at 2 a.m., regardless of agreements. Grown people forget their lists when shame taps them on the shoulder. 2 weeks in, Marcus missed a check-in and my sink backed up on the same day. I stood ankle-deep in soapy water and said a string of words. The Bible doesn't print. But then he showed up with a wrench and a humble face, fixed the pipe, and apologized to the sink and me. "I'm learning," he said. "Me too," I admitted. Because the older I get, the more I believe in telling the truth before resentment gets a chair. We marked Malik's 1 month with a backyard potluck that looked like a census found out where joy lives. There were too many potato salads and not enough forks. Deshaun, the trumpet kid from 2 blocks over, played "You Are My Sunshine" like it was jazz, and the magnolia threw shade like grace. Marcus's mother and I stood shoulder to shoulder near the grill, arguing about whether ribs count as a side or a sacrament. "You did right," she said suddenly, eyes on Alana nursing under a ridiculous floral scarf. "That night with the papers." I didn't pretend I hadn't been waiting for it. "We all did wrong before we did right," I said. "Let's keep trying to pick the second thing." As the sun slid itself down behind my pecan, Nia tugged my dress. "Grandma," she said, holding up a dandelion puff she'd found in the crack by the steps, "wish time." She closed her eyes, thought so hard I could feel it, and blew. "I wished for Mama to sleep and Baby to laugh and Daddy to not forget trash day," she announced. "Also for you to have more blue folders." I laughed until my ribs complained. "Amen," I said. Then she leaned close, conspirator serious. "What did you wish?" "Accuracy," I answered, because I have come to love that word more than I loved winning. "And joy that stands up straight." Later, when the folding chairs clacked into their thinner selves and the last dish towel surrendered, I sat on the back steps with a slice of Miss Jean's pound cake and watched my house inhale. The porch light glowed like a small, honest moon. Inside, the blue accordion sat open on the counter, tabs neat, noise tucked in the back, what I won't trade on top like a crown that fits now. My phone buzzed. It was a picture from the library. 20 women holding up their folders, names big, eyes level. The caption from the branch manager read, "We ran out." "Order more?" I texted back, "Yes, order 100, and tell them to start with their names." Before bed, I walked my fence line, a habit I picked up in hardest times. The magnolia dropped one fat petal into the grass like a check mark. I locked my door. The click was small and certain. I wrote the date at the top of a fresh page and made my last list of this chapter. Held, dignity, peace, porch light, Nia, Malik, the trust, the class, my name. Let go, shame, noise, the urge to explain myself to people who audition as family and forget their lines. Then I put the pen down, turned out the light, and lay in the soft dark, with my heart beating like a drum someone finally learned to play on time. Tomorrow there will be diapers and a workshop and a city aide asking me to put plain language into a pamphlet that might keep a woman from signing her life away over gumbo. Marcus will forget something and remember 2 other things. Alana will sleep a whole hour she doesn't owe to any wolf. Nia will practice her ends until the pencil squeaks. And me? I will make coffee, water the basil, straighten the folders, and open my door when Laverne knocks with another cousin who brought a lease that needs a spine. Freedom isn't loud, it's accurate. And in this house, finally, accuracy sings.